Hey folks, we are continuing on with our series about how the different temperaments can trigger other temperaments with the best of intentions here. Today we're going to be talking about the melancholic. So, all you melancholics that are out there that want to be able to communicate better with other people, we're going to have some really great tips for you to make sure that the people that you're seeking to have a great relationship are open to these high ideals that you have as a melancholic.
Stick around.
See you in there. Hey folks, welcome back to the Catholic Coaching Podcast. Matt Ingold here.
And Aaron.
And we are your lovely hosts. We've been sticking with the temperaments again. A lot of people always have questions on this. And hey, we've got ability to trigger one another based on the common habits of our temperaments.
Isn't that fun?
That's so fun, especially for people longing to live in better relationships, communicate better. When you can start to understand and be a little bit more sensitive to the ways that even with the best of intentions, just your habit of being can kind of rub somebody the wrong way. You can start to kind of just work through some ways that you might temper that.
Yeah.
Always giving them responsibility to have their emotions. But
I think there's a more benign way of saying this, you trigger people. I think it's more like when you don't know what your temperament is and you don't know what other people's temperaments are and how they can kind of not work well together.
Yeah. We're all pursuing something that is good, right? We all have a best intention in mind. And based on our temperaments, we tend to approach that from different angles. And oftentimes, when you see somebody approaching even the same good from a different angle, you might be like, why are they doing it that way? Well, they're doing it that way because they're adding some value in a way that they perceive to be adding some value. And it doesn't mean that the way that you go about it is not valuable, right? But rather, there's a way that you can kind of communicate the complementarity of your perspective and also be open to seeing the complementarity of their perspective. Okay.
Yes.
That's kind of like what we're working towards here. So being able to see the other person while at the same time seeing yourself and knowing what you do best and how you show up best and creating opportunities for you guys to really collaborate more. So what we're focusing on here in this episode is how the melancholic can trigger people with the best of intentions. Okay. Melancholic's my secondary, so I can identify with a lot of these things. So we're going to be going through how the melancholic can interact with each one of the other temperaments, including other melancholics, and common ways that they may, with the best of intentions, not intention. Nobody's trying to just piss somebody off.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But with the best of intentions, how the habitual way that you show up may just rub some of these other temperaments the wrong way.
And at the same time, we are not abdicating the responsibility. If you are being triggered, we have said this many, 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 many times. That is first your work to do. Your responsibility. But it's always good to know. I don't really want to go around triggering everyone. So that's really what this podcast is for. So all you melancholics, listen up.
Well, here's the thing. When I have learned the ways that, say, my choleric, and we talked about that in a previous episode, the way that my choleric can rub people the wrong way, when I'm aware of that, out of love for the other person, I can intentionally temper that.
Yeah.
Or even couch the way that I word things differently in ways that are going to be more aligned with how they're naturally motivated or just how they naturally feel comfortable showing up and doing what they do best. I can create space for the other person to be authentically who they are and receive the other person as a gift. So that's the real benefit that I see here. So
let's do it.
Okay. So let's talk about how we melancholics can trigger our choleric friends.
Yes.
Or coworkers here.
Yeah.
All right. What do we got, Aaron?
Number one, and I'm not even choleric. It's tertiary for me, but
trust me, it's there.
I feel like this is a big one for me. Over-analysis. So, analysis paralysis even too. Cholerics may become frustrated because cholerics want to get things done by the melancholic's tendency to overanalyze and delay decisions. I don't think it's so much the overanalyzation. Is that a word?
Yeah. Overanalysis.
That may, thank you, overanalysis. That really bothers the cleric. I think it's more of the delay of decisions.
It's a delay of decision. Yes. And it kind of bleeds into this next thing, which is perfectionism. So oftentimes the overanalysis is driven by this desire to get it done perfectly, get it done right. Again,
the right way the first time.
Yes. We melancholics have high ideals, right? And we really want to conform whatever we're doing, all of our actions and the team's actions to meeting that ideal. And when it falls short, it can feel disappointing. And so we, out of a desire to avoid this disappointment or the sadness that comes from not hitting your ideal that you've got, it can tend to, you can get to this thing where you're trying to find the perfect way. And often the perfect way is revealed by stepping off and taking some action towards the way, and you figure it out along the way.
So I think also it's because like the choleric will go by the adage, like
I learn by doing.
Or done is better than perfect.
Sure.
You know, so they'd much rather it be done and complete and accomplished.
Or fail forward, or like, let's get a minimum viable product out there.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. So I think that's another way that it kind of butts head because of the melancholic being like, it has to be perfect the first time I even try it.
Yes. Yeah. Cholerics tend to learn by doing. Right. And so they want to have a little bit of a picture, enough to just get going, and then they want to act, and they want to fail, and they want to act again. And that's how they learn. They learn more by doing, where the melancholic is really wants to get that understanding clearly in their head before they actually step off.
Yep.
Okay. What's next?
Number 3 is pessimism. The melancholic's cautious and sometimes pessimistic outlook can dampen the choleric's enthusiasm and drive, leading to irritation. Yeah. I think one thing that a choleric, I wouldn't say they're like bubbly. They're not bubbly. No. Like a sanguine.
But they're driven.
I
don't like drag.
And they also like hope, right? So so pessimism can kind of work against hope. Obviously, it's the cleric's job to be like, you know, how are you perceiving that comment that you may think is pessimistic? Obviously, that's their work to do. But there's, hope. Hope is the thing that cholerics like.
Yeah, that pessimism can also come off as like, okay, you're just making excuses for not getting it done, like, or you're just creating excuses like as to why we can't move forward with this, and that is something that's very frustrating to a choleric that's wanting to take a vision and turn it into a reality. And so when there's drag that's there, or there's people that are, you know, coming off as a perceived wet blanket, or they're just naysayers, then it can be frustrating. Now, I know also that because just as a secondary melancholic, where the perception could be I'm showing up in my melancholic as a naysayer, but really what I'm trying to do is identify even some of those obstacles that or unanswered questions that we need to address in order to get something done. And because they're so detail oriented, which is such a gift of the melancholic, they often will see challenges that perhaps a choleric does not see, out of the drive to just go and get moving and start getting the action.
So it's coming off as pessimism, but
it's more as pessimism, but it's more of like a, hey, let's.
I would say it's more of an analysis.
Yeah,
it's kind of living in those first two.
Well, it's deliberative. It's assessing real risk that needs to be identified, because if we don't address that risk, we're going to hit it, and it's going to bog us down later on. So let's deal with it now.
Okay.
Yep. Okay.
Number 4, resistance to change. Clerics may be exasperated by the melancholic's resistance to new ideas and changes, as they often seek innovation and swift adaptation.
Yeah. So this is like that, again, that's perhaps a slow, or the perceived resistance to change is just a melancholic trying to seek some clear understanding. And again, seeing all of the nuances of this change, the implications, the ripple effects of it, that perhaps the choleric might have more of a narrower perspective on those things. So cholerics can be quite logical here as well in their decisions. But again, like I think resistance to change, I like the idea of there being, you know, I think a well-balanced choleric is going to recognize the gift that a melancholic has and be able to create space for them to really, and space meaning time, for them to grow in their understanding of the implications of this change and how it's going to affect their life, and how they're going to be able to adjust all these other ideals that they have in their head based on this change that's going about. So it just takes a little bit more time. But it doesn't mean that they're permanently resistant to change.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
And then emotional sensitivity. Clerics who are often more task focused and less emotionally driven may struggle with the melancholic's emotional sensitivity and need for reassurance.
Yeah. Yeah.
What goes on inside of you? Because you're a blend of these two. So, like, is there like a war happening?
Well, it depends on kind of the urgency of the need to get something done. So, when I'm close to a deadline and we just need to be decisive, choleric comes into the driver's seat and really is saying, okay, like I'm a little bit more abrupt, I'm a little bit to the point, and it can come off as brash or a little bit insensitive.
Yeah.
But it's really driven by a desire to get things done efficiently. Let's use as few words as possible, which often can come across as like just being somewhat insensitive or not really considering, how what I'm saying is landing in the other person.
Yeah.
So I think that emotional sensitivity to the melancholic that can receive something, and maybe they're not necessarily hurt in the moment when they first hear it, but they are going to continue to think about it because that's what melancholics do.
So
here's they interiorize. Yeah.
Yeah. Here's what's interesting about this. Everything that we've just read off. Oh my gosh, what is happening to my brain?
It's okay. It's a little on the recovery, and we're in the middle of a detox here too.
Yes.
Again,
so yes,
there's a lot of toxins being pulled out of that beautiful brain.
So okay, everything that we've just said, all these ways that it triggers the choleric.
Yeah.
There's actually these are all strengths
of the melancholic
that are probably in overuse.
Yep.
Probably, but could be looked at as strengths as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's interesting.
I think that's the case in all of these things. Whenever we're triggering something, I think when we're triggering somebody else, kind of the way that we look at it, when you're triggering with somebody else, you are in the overuse of your strengths, and you're in the overuse of your strengths because there's some sort of fear that's driven there, right?
Yeah.
Fear triggers, they go together. So triggered people trigger other people, right? And so if we're showing up in fear, right, it's just going to create that vicious cycle of kind of brushing people the wrong way, triggering other people, or creating a trigger-rich environment. Let's call it that. Cool. Yeah. Let's talk sanguins.
Oh, these two are like opposites, actually.
Sanguins are never triggered by us melancholics.
Yeah. It's the lowest for me, so I'm excited to review these and see. They probably are very relevant to me.
I get it. All right, so number one here. How can the melancholic trigger a sanguine?
Seriousness.
Ooh, what does this mean, Aaron?
It's like, why so serious all the time? Sanguines may find the melancholic serious and introspective nature stifling and may feel restricted by their lack of spontaneity and fun. For sure. Yeah. I don't know if it's stifling. It's for me. Okay. I'll speak from my own experience. For me, it's I see it as a gift and like maybe a way to kind of go contemplative and like, oh, you're serious. It's okay.
Yep.
But also, I think to myself, well, I wouldn't ever want to be that way. And that's just my response to it.
I think this goes hand in hand with number 4 on the list here, which is that reserved nature of the melancholic. And so it tends to be more introspective. Sanguines, right? Those big sanguine personalities are very extroverted, and so they wear everything on their sleeves. And so you never have, a question as to what emotion a sanguine is feeling at a given moment. But there's not that same exterior transparency or understanding or data that the sanguine can take in. And I think specifically of our friend Talia over at the AMU, and she said that she was a soccer coach over there. She is a soccer coach over there, and she had a lot of melancholics that were on the team. And it was after we actually started doing temperaments work with their team that
I recognized it when we first did the workshop.
Oh, she was so excited. She was sitting up front and everybody else was kind of like slow. And she was just like, oh, that's what's going on. It's not that they don't like me. It's just that they just don't respond the same way that I do.
Yes.
And it's just having that understanding, don't expect the melancholic to match your external energy and passion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you kind of jumped to 4, and we can just did
kind
we
of going out of order here.
All right, that's okay. Seriousness, reserved nature, and focus on details. So melancholic.
That's another one.
Yes, this is another one. A melancholic's attention to detail can can be frustrating for sanguines who prefer to see the big picture and enjoy a more carefree approach. For sure. I think also sanguines in this way are impatient because they're like, let's get it done. Like, why are we so focused on all these details? I know for me, I have this thought, and mea culpa, like, it's just like, why? It feels like such a bottleneck, like pointless, like, why are we focusing so much on the details when this is on the other side of it? Like, I just want to get there.
Yeah. Okay. So it's like there's all this energy, and you want to see people getting into movement. And we see sanguines are just so good at just getting people hyped up, galvanized, and just on the move and doing stuff, amazing stuff together. And all of a sudden, this focus on the details is just kind of takes the wind out of the sails.
It's like, excuse me, according to my calculations, this is pausing.
Not how I sound during a meeting. But this kind of goes along with the other trigger here. Is again, it's showing up again for the sanguines. That pessimism, the fourth one that we've got here. Yeah. So that pessimism. As I imagine, it's not focusing on all of the amazing details or the details around why the plan is so perfect and it's going to be so amazing, but rather it's like, where are the ways that this plan can go wrong, or this vision is flawed, or why we have to pause from going forward here. I imagine that's going to be more of the details, those on the pessimistic naysayer or negative side, that are really pissing you off, Aaron.
Well, and some of my gifts are optimism, enthusiasm, and it's not just like it's like I'm mad at the person, but I'm like mad at like the structure, and that you don't need my gift right now.
Is it like, why can't you see it? Is it like an unseen kind of feeling?
I know why they can't see it, because God made them that way. You know what I mean? Like, I know why and what they're focused on and what they value is very different from what I value. And it doesn't make them wrong in that way. So I know intellectually why. It's just, my question always as a sanguine is, why would you want to be that way?
Yeah.
Why would you want to be like attuned to details? Because I so am not. You know what I mean? And I'm so not gifted in that area.
Do you value it? Do you see the value in it?
I probably need to work on that a little bit more. And maybe that's it. Maybe I just don't see the actual value, like the result value.
Yes.
Of it.
Yes.
I mean, I look back on those situations. Yeah, so I'm glad. So yeah, it's kind of this interesting, man, there's nobody else who will bring you to the forefront, like you're a mirror image of what you're going through and like all of your stuff to the forefront, than somebody who's complete opposite than you. Because you're like, you're doing it wrong, but you're
there you go. Well, yeah, and see, you're doing it wrong, and then that goes to the other thing that can really trigger the sanguine, which is criticism, right? That's number 5 here. So criticism is something that can just, again, that critical takes the wind out of the sails. I'm doing fine here. You've been all over the place.
I'm criticizing
your mouth.
How close you are to it.
Quit criticizing me. I got my ideal in my head. Okay. But even like that hurt and that demotivation that can come from that criticism.
Yes.
Which melancholics, again, they don't necessarily, they're not trying to hurt anybody. They're really like, they're actually very considerate people.
Yes, they are.
And I can tell you this: when as a melancholic, when I am, or my secondary here, when I'm around a sanguine that is only showing the positive side of something, I feel a strong inclination to create a little bit of balance. All right, where it's just like, okay, I don't necessarily know if like it's gonna. So I want to get to the place where we're all seeing together. But you've really made one case for one side, the positive side of things, and I really want to balance this out so that we can have a good logical consideration going forward. I think the best explanation of this, of the two, the yin and the yang with this, is the Bluey episode where they're all going to the pool. Okay. And, Bandit, the father, is who's so like, phlegmatic. Yes.
Who's sanguine phlegmatic, for sure. And is just like, let's go to the pool. Like, mom's no fun. Da, 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 da.
Uncle Strike said we could use his pool while he's in Bali.
Yeah.
Don't just get the fun stuff, I mean the bag of stuff.
Boring.
Yeah, boring.
And they don't bring anything to the pool. There's no sunblock, no towels, nothing. And and they're all just...
I'm hungry.
Oh, hello, hungry. This is bored. Oh, tough crowd.
Not prepared at all, but they went to have fun. They just ran forward. So now I can see it through the lens of Bluey.
Thank you, Bluey.
And then finally the mom comes and she brings all this stuff because she prepared and she's has attention to detail.
Mom is way more fun.
Oh, that's nice to hear.
Mom!
So yeah, I think, sure, I can see it now.
Thank you, Chili.
I can see the value
I feel seen by you, Chili.
All right.
Okay.
How does a melancholic trigger a melancholic?
Well, it's like a perfectionism duel. Yeah,
Duel.
That's one. So
Who
both
is
of
more
them,
perfect?
Well, it's more of a battle of the ideals that are there.
Interesting.
Okay. So again, melancholics, high ideals. Yeah, I was thinking about this. A melancholic's high ideals and very, very reluctant to let go of their image of perfection, right? And so when you have two different images of perfection, you can't pursue both at the same time, all right? Not as a team, right? Not collectively. And so this can be something that's triggering to the melancholic because it's just okay, we're divided here in terms of what we're pursuing.
Okay.
Yep.
So a battle of whose ideal is more perfect or better. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah, the overanalysis here, I think, could also be something. I mean, in some ways I can see the let's create some time to talk back and forth here, but at some point, and I think most melancholics, especially if they're on a team, they know that they need to produce something. At some point, they're aware that they need aware enough, hopefully, like a healthy melancholic, so aware enough that at some point you have to make a decision, you got to move forward. And but you can get into this cycle of there's always more information that I could gather.
Okay. So here's another way I see this: over strategizing. That's
Sure.
another version of that.
Yes.
If we were just being strategic this whole time, it feels like we're getting something done, but we're not actually taking action.
Well, melancholics look at cognitive action just as exhausting and kind of
efficacious.
productive,
Yeah.
right? As any sort of physical action and churning out a physical product when you're done. Okay, so that's something I think that's important for the other temperaments to understand is that when this melancholic is really staying in their head, it's real work for them. They see this as real productive work and they value it the same way that a choleric values holding the end product in their hand.
All right. So here's a question: What if it isn't actually productive?
Well, I mean, that's where I think you need to
Look at the
really
fruits.
reframe and look at the fruits and ultimately, folks, it's at some point. We'll get into this later on in the podcast, but at some point, it's all about getting aligned towards a common vision, right? And it's being able to hold up when you say what are the results? It's what are the results based on why we came together in the first place? What's the vision? What's the mission?
Right.
And are we moving towards this or are we not?
The reason why I bring that up is because we have a lot of, melancholics are 40% of the
population.
population.
Yeah.
We have a lot of people in our coach training who are melancholic coaches, obviously. And the reason why I bring this up is because so often they'll be I'm doing my work, but it's no, you're doing your thought work on it, but you're actually not taking the action that you need to take to grow your business or whatever.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of buffering going on there.
Yeah. So I think even moving on here, we can continue down the list, and there's not going to be a lot of new things here, but that criticism, all right? Criticism is another area where, again, melancholics with the best of intention, they're trying to help. They're trying to give some more information. They're trying to give a new perspective. They have an ideal in their head, and they want to be able to share that, and it often can come forth as a critique. And I think where melancholics could grow in a little bit of virtue here is first making an effort to see the perspective or understand the ideal of the other person, right? Of any person, but definitely other melancholics. I guarantee it, they have it, right? They may have not put words to it, but asking some questions of really understanding why it is that they're taking the path that they're taking or the pursuit that they're taking is because they have an ideal that they're pursuing, right? And so helping them to understand that could be important. Even the pessimism here. So the pessimism, and I think the criticism can go hand in hand.
Well, they could create a negative feedback loop. I love that.
Absolutely, yes.
Reinforcing each other's doubts and fears, leading to a lack of progress and motivation.
And then the emotional sensitivity.
It's like, let's all look at all the problems over and over and over again. Can you tell I have like a lot of thoughts about that?
Well, what can happen with the emotional sensitivity is that, like, here's what happens when you criticize a melancholic. They leave, they think about it. A lot of the time they're thinking about what they could have said instead to defend themselves. They're starting to think thoughts about you and think in their mind why you have that perspective, what's wrong with you, and they're starting to paint a picture in their head of you now. And that's the lens that they look at you and how they receive information from you going forward. Now, that's their work to do, okay? But just know this, that when you criticize that melancholic, they are going to continue to think about that. And you can get this vicious cycle when you have two melancholics that continue to have a deteriorating perception of one another in their head that just compounds to the point where there's this, it's just the relationship is just imploding.
Here's another interesting thing. I don't look at melancholics, I might be wrong about this, but like as general people pleasers. I think that's more of a phlegmatic.
No, they serve an ideal more
and
so.
this is what I think is interesting. So because they're not people pleasers, like they will say the blunt thing, but then also they're like highly sensitive.
Yes.
So it's almost like, yeah, and I could see two melancholics going back and forth, like saying the blunt thing and then also taking offense to that, and then it just kind of continuing to disintegrate.
Yeah, and this is why it's so important, you guys, especially for us melancholics, like to pause and really get curious about what is the ideal of the other person. What's the goal? And this is John Paul II. He talks about is the foundation of his personalistic norm. You know, we always have to consider whenever we have somebody that's the object of our actions here, like we're trying to move somebody or get somebody motivated or get them to do something or think something or feel something. Whenever a person is the object of our actions, we always have to consider that they have, or at least should have, their own personal end in mind. They've got their own ideal. They've got their own goal. And so the appropriate response or disposition towards that person is to be curious, compassionately curious. What is it that's there? And that is the way that you can short circuit kind of that compounding, deformative relationship where you're just presuming, and you're no longer compassionately curious about the other person.
So what you are explaining between the two melancholics, they have two different ideals.
Correct.
We could say that that's across the board with all the temperaments. Like they all have different values and different ideals.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep. Melancholics just tend to hold them very, very, very strongly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So phlegmatic, how does the melancholic trigger a phlegmatic? We jokingly say like phlegmatics are rarely triggered. So, but like we could say ruffle their feathers or maybe just make their balanced life a little imbalanced.
Stop standing on my toe. Okay.
Yeah.
Whatever.
I like everything
it's
you
okay.
like. So how does a melancholic trigger a phlegmatic? High standards. Phlegmatic is my secondary, and so I can definitely relate to this. The melancholic's high standards and perfectionism can overwhelm phlegmatics who prefer a more relaxed and easygoing approach. Yeah, I can relate to that a lot, where I'm just like, I mean, why is it a big deal? Like that's just the thought in my head. I'm like, partially because as a phlegmatic, what I value is equilibrium, consistency, like balance, peace, harmony. And I'm like, this just doesn't seem like that big of a deal.
Yeah, there's a heaviness to it. And so even with that high ideal, there's that demand for precision. So this is another way. So like hitting the mark, and again, this is like demand for precision can often come in like an intolerance for mistakes or a heavy critical environment. That can be very just frustrating for a phlegmatic. Yeah,
exactly. Yep. Critical nature.
Nailed it. Thanks, Matt.
Yes. Yeah.
Good job.
I don't have anything to add to that. Critical nature. The melancholic's critical feedback can demotivate phlegmatics, which is also very hard just to get us motivated in the first place. So something to consider if you are a melancholic listening to this and you have a phlegmatic in your life, like it takes a lot of effort for the phlegmatic to get motivated in the beginning. Once they are motivated and convicted, they remain.
Yes.
They like remain assiduous and loyal, and they continue moving. But just getting them into that space, just be mindful of anything that could pause somebody.
Well, if you think about it, the phlegmatics are really driven by keeping people together. So they're typically high harmony and they've got high ideals, but they really want to make sure that everything's kind of copacetic. And so this kind of moves into the next thing here where we're getting to the pessimism again, showing up in the melancholic.
Certainly
what it is
theme here.
Yeah. So the pessimism can, if you've got somebody with a grumpy face sitting at the board table, the phlegmatics notice that. They notice it because they want people to be aligned. And when somebody's got grumpy face at the table, they're curious what's going on because they know that person might be disengaged, or they're thinking that person might be disengaged. And so it grabs their attention. Okay. And so just that kind of pessimism, negativity, yes. Again, this could be something that's perceived as a threat to the harmony of the entire group.
Yes. Yep. The final one, I certainly can relate to this one. I'm a big fan of emotions, right? Like big, happy, positive emotions. Mm-hmm. But emotional intensity, and because of the melancholics, I guess, lean towards more sadness and
But it's even high passion.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I think that can be really off-putting or triggering, I guess, to phlegmatic. I've seen this show up in my own life. My daughter, who's 6, who is still below the age of reason, mm-hmm. and has very high emotions. I find myself just always being shocked by them. Like always being like, whoa, chill. Like that's my first response. Like, whoa, mm-hmm. chill. Not mm-hmm. like, whoa, she's feeling really big feelings. Like it's, whoa, stop.
Okay. So that intense, right. The emotional intensity is it's seen as something that's a threat to the stability.
Yes. Or just the peace and the harmony of the house. Okay. It's like, well, okay, everything was quiet. And then all of a sudden there's a scream for arguably not that big of a deal. You know what I mean? Like you couldn't tie your shoe or whatever. Or
something that's just passive aggressive. It's just like, know, it doesn't necessarily have to be like a scream or explosion. Right. It just could come in the form of just like an emotion that just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense.
Like drama. Like dramatic.
Yes.
Like it's like there is a distaste for the dramatic, mm-hmm. For the phlegmatic.
Okay. So those are all the different ways mm-hmm. that temperaments can be triggered by the melancholic here. So like, again, and we've already started to touch on this, but it's important for the melancholic to get in touch with their own drive here. What are the goals that they want to accomplish? Because lessening the trigger conditions while at the same time seeing yourself and seeing the good that you're pursuing, both those things go hand in hand. So it's not just decreasing trigger conditions, but it's also increasing your ability to communicate what the good is that you're actually seeking. Okay. Yeah. So what's that good that the melancholic is seeking? Well, one of the first things is that integrity and honesty,
mm-hmm.
right?
Transparency
across the board. So there's a high value, high premium on truthfulness, ethical behavior, in themselves, but also in the team. There's high standards there. And they just appreciate genuine, straightforward communication and actions.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
What else?
Depth and meaning. Mm-hmm. They often seek depth in relationships, conversations, and activities. Superficial interactions or tasks tend to be less satisfying for them or draining for them. Mm-hmm. I noticed that, Avila is melancholic, and our daughter, and I've just noticed words that actually appeal to her better. And so when I'm asking her to do something, I'm like, hey, it would mean a lot to mommy and daddy if you did this thing. And I found that there's a lot less resistance when I say it would mean a lot, like using that word meaning, like it would actually be a deep meaningful thing for you to do this for us. Obviously, I'm not lying. It is something that is meaningful to us.
I'm going to try that approach, because my approach has been like, hey, we all have our job to do in the family. Which I like.
A choleric
that's
approach.
like, it's just like, oh, okay, yeah, like doing my job means belonging, right? But it's also like, I don't know if I want to do that. Okay. So another thing that melancholics are also seeking is that just a quality and excellence. I think of, Bryant, who's melancholic sanguine, who's come on our team, and the way that he's just raised the quality standard. And so whenever he's approaching a project, I know that he's looking or asking the question, how can I do this excellently?
Yeah.
And that's an important thing for him. And he's also but he's also got that maturity to know that we have limited resources. And so being able to have a conversation with him in terms of like, how do we pursue the excellence that you have within the resources that we've got, right? That's always a good way to approach. But
and also
that.
This is like the flip side, the value that's underneath the perfectionism that we've seen.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep. Next thing.
Stability and security. They value a sense of stability, predictability in their environment, consistency in relationships, routines, and work is important to them. So consistency in that way, just kind of probably knowing what they're going to get is probably really helpful in being able to bring about that excellence and quality.
Well, yes. And again, think of how introspective the melancholic is. And so, but at the same time, they have a finite, like, conscious brain capacity, like everybody, right? And so something that's important to self-regulation is to minimize the amount of distractions that your brain's going to be focused on. Okay, we could say this across the board, but melancholics can easily be, go down rabbit holes and kind of pursue. And so having some good boundaries in terms of a stable focus for that melancholic is going to be very helpful. And then finally, often this kind of bleeds into the next one. Like they need that time for just the introspection and reflection as well.
Yep.
Yes. Time to be able to understand, time to be able to readjust their ideals to fit any changes that are going on. Even like the way that we do with Avila, it's just like, hey, you've got 5 more minutes on this TV versus turn it off right now.
Yeah.
Like that, the time to adjust the ideal is important.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's really powerful. I would say every single time I've ever done the temperaments workshop with people, all of the melancholics will mark the one ideal condition that says time for prayer and quiet.
Yeah.
Every single one of them will say that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And out of like 20 of them, they all choose that one. And that's always a number one.
Yes.
So having that time and reflection and that freedom to have that time. I know even personally with Avila, if she's been with kids all day or people or doing things all day, she needs to come home and literally be by herself.
Not stimulated.
Quiet. Yes.
Yeah.
In her room, just playing by herself or just sitting. I know that she's overstimulated. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So how do we as melancholics then just approach these conversations? What might be a way that we do it? And so whenever we're approaching conversation, we're trying to mitigate somebody's triggers. What we're also doing is we're trying to create their ideal conditions. We're trying to see them. We're trying to also be effectively communicate an ideal that we're pursuing, right? We want to see ourselves here as well. And then we're inviting them into some sort of a collaboration. So how you can pursue some sort of common good together. All right. And so,
what would a melancholic say to a choleric, and then tell me if that works?
Well, I know it works because I wrote this, and I'm the choleric, and so it was just like, what would I want a melancholic to say to me? And so, like, I think of again, cholerics can be triggered by those melancholics that are bogged down in the details, and they just don't want to move forward, analysis paralysis. But just being able to acknowledge this and say, hey, I know that I get really focused on the details, but also that we need to make a decision at some point, and move forward. That. If somebody says that to me, it's just like, okay, they get it. I know we're not going to be stuck in this analysis paralysis forever. There's an end to it.
It's not permanent.
It's not permanent. So that's something that's really helpful for me. All right. So then from there, it's like, hey, the melancholic saying this to the choleric, can you let me know when the deadline is?
Yeah.
Because I want to use that space to really do my analysis, knowing that at some point we got to make a decision. But I really want to be able to make as as well-informed, data-driven, logical decision as we can here, so we can go forward and we can get this done efficiently. I mean, like even those words are words that are so appealing to a choleric. I want to get it done and get it done efficiently. Reduce waste, things like that. And so it reframes your gift as something that actually lends itself to the goals that a choleric is driven towards.
All right. Try out the sanguine one. See if, all right. Pretend you're melancholic talking to me as a sanguine, and then I'll tell you if it's right or not. No, I'm just kidding.
So like I thought of this in the sense of how the sanguine can be triggered by the pessimistic or analytical or naysaying nature of a melancholic to look at the problems and things like that. So, hey, you've got amazing gifts to see things positively.
Done. Successful.
So like,
I'm just kidding.
I intentionally let out with like, you're amazing. You know what's amazing about you? It's like, hey, you got amazing gifts to just see things positively. And I know that my discernment can often come off as overly negative. I don't mean for it to come that way. I actually think that we can really balance one another out. And I'm going to work at affirming first the good ideas and the good things that you present, and the good insights without just kind of going to my default. And this is kind of like where I go is like to saying why they might not work. I'm going to temper that. But ultimately I want to be as convicted as you and how we're moving forward so that we can move forward together as a team.
Yeah, works.
How's it feel? What'd you like about that?
The flattery, and that's it. No, I'm just kidding. No, it's kind of like takes the us versus you or me versus you out of it, and we're working together towards this. Let's bring our gifts together. That's like really helpful for a sanguine.
Yeah. Let's get together. Okay, the melancholics. How the melancholic can approach the other melancholic. This is kind of simple, but again, it goes back to both having those high ideals. And so, like, it's like, hey, please don't take my critique as being dismissive, or not seeing you. I'd really like to discuss this with you and share insights together so that we can both get a clear picture on the best way to go forward. That would be something that's helpful.
I also think it would be really helpful to be like, what is your ideal here?
I think that's
and then
a better way to do it. Yeah.
Here's mine. Mm-hmm. And then like, let's not argue whose is better, but like find a common ground.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's like goal being, okay, we like the ideal. We like getting on a common picture. We like getting on a common picture by questioning and analysis and thinking and sharing ideas. Mm-hmm. And so let's lean into that together and get a clear picture on where we can be aligned going forward.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Finally, the phlegmatic.
You go ahead.
Well, it's just, again, I thought of this in terms of like the example I gave earlier where the phlegmatic might see that pessimism or the scrunched up, the cranky face of the melancholic and just be like, hey, when you see me kind of looking a little bit, angry or something like that, or just having this concern on my face, that's really just me processing through what's going on. Believe it or not, like it's not necessarily there's a lot of like intensity going on, but also like it's actually really helpful too for me to have a space to be able to share out loud what's going on. Is that something that you can help create like a space for me to like kind of share some of my thoughts so we can get aligned and align going forward?
Yeah.
How's that hit you?
I think it's good. I think it's asking the phlegmatic for help, which they want to give.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then also
That's the
maybe
right
even
answer.
just like, correct.
That's what I was thinking.
Yep. It's perfect. It's perfect, Matt. It was a perfect answer.
Thank you. And that's a perfect way to wrap up today's episode. So again, if you are a melancholic, just understand that there are certain ways that you may, with the best of intentions, your tendencies might kind of rub people the wrong way. And the way that we grow together is being able to understand that people see things differently than we do. We get curious about how they see things. And also when we have an understanding of how they might see things, we can soften our approach and really tailor our approach in a way that's loving towards the other person, that is going to bring us together versus, cause rifts in the relationship.
Yeah.
Cool.
And if you want to learn more and how to apply all this information to your life immediately, come join us in the Academy.
Cool. We will see you guys in Academy Plus. Please share this with your fellow melancholic friends. All
Bye.
Right. God bless. Hey, thanks for sticking with us in the Catholic Coaching Podcast. If you like what you heard,
please like and subscribe, and we'll see you again.